Okay, so take two. Hello, and welcome to the Dungeon Crawl. You guys didn't hear it a second ago, but I did a very enthusiastic intro, but we were
Yeah,
not recording.
I was excited. Got me
I was
going.
excited. Lost a lot of it. Yes. How is everybody doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm okay, but I need to preface something about
Okay.
this episode.
Sure. Yeah. Preface away.
Last week I had said that we would do a session 1 episode,
Yep.
covering all things session 1 and what to do.
hmm I was super
I
excited.
may,
Ready, prepped.
yeah,
Got it
yeah,
going.
I may have lied.
What?
Yeah, there's something that we missed.
Oh no. What happened?
You can't have a session 1 or really D&D at all without player characters, and we need to talk about how to do that, how to make one.
True. You do need a character.
Absolutely. So this week, what we're going to do is somewhat cover the mechanics and how to construct a character, as well as maybe the philosophy behind how you can choose or find or pick what sort of mythical person you want to play in this
Mm.
magical RPG world of Dungeons and Dragons. So, to start off, I guess I wanted to list off a couple of things that you may need. First and foremost, your brain, possibly a pencil and computer, some
We
paper.
don't need a brain.
You do need a brain. That's where all the magic happens. If you know SpongeBob, it's the imagination. You've seen SpongeBob, right?
I have. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, good. That was
You
one
need
of
a
the best
box though
episodes.
too. Then I guess.
You substitute box for your DM's house, probably. That could work.
You can
Sounds
play
something you may
Yeah, you can play D&D in your DM's box.
There you go.
Perfect.
Box, house, same thing. So, something else you'll very, very likely need is a D&D 5e character sheet, which is within a lot of the kits that come with player's handbooks that you can get. Player handbook would also be very important to get right now. If you
Yes.
can have it, or if you've purchased one, it'd be awesome to put in front of you because we'll be referencing it a little bit this episode.
Use a D&D Beyond if you want a PDF copy or a digital copy, or just go pick
Parrots
one
are
up at
fun
your.
to play in game, but not in real life.
Or you can pick one up at your local game store or
Yeah,
Amazon.
make some friends. That's a good way to meet a D&D party. Insert that into one of the first episodes. Something else you might need is a D6 or 4 of them. And we'll talk about that later. So that's kind of negotiable. Something else that's also negotiable is your DM. You may or may not need them around to help you or kind of guide your decision. Also, they can be a referee in a sense to tell you, no, you can't do that because we've set these rules in my game and we're only sticking to the player's handbook or this resource, that resource. So just get a little discussion going with the DM on whether you need to be at his house to make your character
Or her house.
or her house, their house.
My house.
It is your house. It's a good box. So I suppose I wanted to ask Ryan, I want to ask you a question is
Sure.
Where do you think you should start with character creation? Because you've told me that you don't know too much about it.
Yeah, I'm not. We told this before in the earlier podcast, but I've only ever made one player character for your campaign, and the way I started with it, I decided to go with a concept first, an idea, because I mean I'm usually a DM guy, so I like making NPCs that have cool, complex stories and motivation and stuff. So I usually always start off with their backstory, what made them who they are, how they got there. So that's usually where I get started with a character.
Okay, so I would say that you fit more into the portion of players that prefer roleplay or
Yeah.
like starting with a concept rather than getting into the nitty gritty, the mechanics of a character. And I think that's a good way to start if you don't know too much about the ins and outs of making a character or what makes a race a certain race. You can find somebody in popular fiction or a character that you really enjoy and go based off of that. Or if you've seen things like Lord of the Rings, you're like, I really want to be an elf boy or an elf girl or whatever, and portray that character. But I would advise you to get that player handbook, go to the races section, and read all of the wonderful things that show up there, because you can get a really good taste for what that race is like in that world, their politics, the characteristics, what sort of physical traits they have, how they
And if
look.
your DM is doing a good job, or they're pretty intense with the story and world as well, especially if it's a homebrewed world, then hopefully they will talk to you and tell you how that race fits into the world. If you go with an elf, maybe the elves in the certain area where you guys are starting are ostracized or looked down upon. So it's important to keep stuff like that in mind as well.
Absolutely. And it gets even more in depth because some races have sub-races as well. Ultimately, for the people that want to play their character truthfully and they want to be a race that can facilitate that really well, make sure you read through and you discuss with your DM about a certain race or an aspect and really see if it, hits home with what you're wanting to do, because you can break, I guess, I don't know how to word it, but you don't have to stick exactly with what that race is. You hear about how dwarfs love architecture and stone and rocks, but you could be a dwarf that hates that, denounces it, and is
cool.
more magically inclined. You don't have to
stick to the stereotypes.
With the stereotypes, not at all. You're completely right, Ryan. But it's a great place to find inspiration if you know absolutely nothing about what you'd want to do, is just reading through that portion inside of the player's handbook. Ryan, I'll put you on the spot here. If you want to try reading a little bit of the description for one of the races that you're interested in.
Sure, I would love to.
If you want.
I'd be happy to.
I'm nowhere near as great at navigating this player as you probably are.
So I'll go with one of the kind of more out there races, the Dragonborn. I think one of my favorite things about the player's handbook and a lot of the resources that have races and different things is they'll usually start with a quote or a little like poem or something about the race. They'll kind of give you a kind of a better view on what the exact race is like and how they stand in the world. For example, the one for Dragonborn has a little parable, little thing saying, her father stood on the first of the 3 stairs that led down from the portal unmoving. The scales of his face had grown paler around the edges. And just does a whole little, almost like a little story, a little short little story there. But then it dives into things like just saying brief things where they came from, born of dragons, as their name proclaims. The Dragonborn walk proudly through a world, etc., etc. Then it goes down to different sections talking about, their clans that they come from, and then a fantastic place because you got to name your character at some point. It has a little section talking about Dragonborn names or half-elf names, tiefling names, etc. Stuff along those lines. For like a cool Dragonborn name, it's Gesh. That's a cool name. Or Thava, Sora. Fantastic. Then from there, it can dive into clan names. So you could pick where your Dragonborn comes from. And some traits that they come with, like they got 30 feet of speed. That's important. Not all races have 30 feet of speed.
Most of them do.
Yeah, most of them do. But if you go with a small little boy, 25 feet, that's all he can go.
It's interesting to think about that, and it's a lot bigger of a, I guess, hindrance than you think, because D&D is a turn-based game technically, and if everybody's going their full speed the entire time, you will be far behind them very quickly.
Yes.
Which is an interesting thing to think about. So if you've got a halfling or somebody of slower pace in your party, you all have to go slower to help them and make them feel a part of your group.
Or if you're a centaur, you can go 40 feet. Boom.
That's interesting. Wait, you can play centaur?
Well, we'll get into this later, but there are different resources that you can look at. Similar to what Braxton was saying earlier, that they're, talk with your DM and ask if it's okay if you pull from this resource you found from this book online, or, Kobold Press, some of the stuff they put out, DM's, DM Guild, stuff like that. Check in with your DM. Make sure it's okay.
That is quite fun for me, looking at other resources, because the player's handbook, especially if you've played D&D a bit, you'll have looked over and perused and read these things for a bit.
Yeah.
Things get stale sometimes, but most of you probably are new at this, or maybe not. I don't know. I'm not going to assume. But if you are, hopefully it's all fresh.
There's also Volo's Guide, another one put out by Wizards of the Coast, the guys that make D&D 5e. They have, so if you get bored of the more normal races, they got a whole bunch of monstrous races here. The Furbolg, the Goliath, Lizard Folk, Tabaxi. Tabaxi are cute because I like cats, so I'm all about it.
I mean, I've even heard people playing goblins.
Goblins, yeah, exactly.
Which is quite interesting. When you think about it, that does make sense. But for you people that want to roleplay mostly, they're the actors or just somebody who has this fantasy version of themselves that you absolutely want to portray and you don't care too much about the mechanics, I will try to entice you by saying certain races have different abilities. Let's go with that Dragonborn from earlier. If you guys didn't know, certain Dragonborns have breath variants based off of the race that they are, and I don't know if you knew, Ryan, but even aside from fire, certain races can spew acid.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I don't know if you knew that.
Because they come about it. Because they come from the actual big boy dragons, and there are different dragons that breed different things.
True. Oh, now I'm starting to think about the part in our campaign where we learned about that sort of thing.
What do you mean?
That's the secret.
Oh, secrets.
That's our campaign. They can't know about that. Not allowed to know.
Okay.
But no, we talk about our campaign quite a bit. I'm just joking. It's just a lot to explain. Essentially, Dragonborns were sent to the mortal planes to kill everything.
Murder.
But for those of you that are more inclined towards the mechanics side of things, I still would recommend going to the player's handbook and taking a look at the races to see what stats they get, what abilities they are proficient in.
Languages.
Exactly. I suppose it would be good to look at the tweet we've posted for this episode at Dungeon Crawl. At the Dungeon Crawl? What is it, Ryan? I always forget.
At Dungeon Crawl Pod.
At Dungeon Crawl Pod. I don't think I'll ever actually have that down. Yeah, hopefully we'll have posted a link to a typical character sheet that you'll see.
Make sure you give us a follow, like all of our posts, reply to everything.
Absolutely. Every single post. All of it. And if this is like 5 years down the line and you're starting to listen to our entire catalog of podcasts, go through all of it.
Hopefully we're still around.
We might have been done in by the Mad Mage of Kavoth.
I hope not.
And probably. He's got plans for all of us. But the character sheet, if you look at it in the top left, you see a spot for your character name. That can come later. But the first place to begin is class and level. So we got ahead of ourselves and picked the race, but I do think that should come before it. You see in this box in the top right, you've got class and level in the top left of that box, and below it is race. Once you've started looking at race, you'll need to make the connection towards the left side of the screen where you see these boxes for strength, dexterity, constitution,
a lot of boxes.
Intelligence. There are so many boxes.
I'm overwhelmed.
It is a lot at first, but once you've understood it, it gets a lot easier until you get to spells. Then it gets hard again.
Well, hopefully you'll start at a lower level. Make it easy on you first.
But for me, when I started at a lower level, I just start looking at the higher levels, I start freaking out because I'm like, oh, I'll be that one day. But I don't know the specific characteristics for all the races. But off the top of my head and what I can see in front of me right now is that, for strength, Dragonborns get a +2 to strength. And we'll talk about what that means later. Mountain Dwarves get a +2. Half-Orcs get a +2. Humans get a +1. If you go on the other end of the spectrum with, say, Wisdom or Intelligence, for Intelligence, High Elves get a +1. Gnomes get +2. Interesting. That's really cool. Yeah, they are crafty boys.
They are.
But each race kind of fits in a different category or inclination that their physical makeup of their race leans them towards. I mean, most High Elves, you think of a High Elf when you go to Skyrim immediately, they're adept in magic and they're studious, but it doesn't mean that you can't make an elf that is a barbarian super strong and forgoes magic. It's not. You're not stuck with those situations. But something to consider with that, Ryan, that we've talked about before is there's a way to be extremely efficient might not be the best word, but if you want to be the most optimized character, you might pick a certain combination.
Yes.
So that's what I tell to you people that like to make the most efficient character is look at these bonuses and see which one will lean towards being the most combat based or most efficient.
And I'd say if you are overwhelmed, say it's your first character, granted, it can definitely pay off down the line if you go ahead and learn all the ins and outs of the character sheet. But if you just want to get started and start playing some games, then I highly recommend hopping over to D&D Beyond and using their character creation tool. It's very handy and very easy to just kind of, it walks you through it. Granted, there are a lot of things that if you have not purchased the required material, you cannot use it, but there is still a lot of free stuff that just allows you to play with some things.
Right. So let's continue on and I suppose go with this Dragonborn that we're thinking about. And maybe kind of try to make a character out of him. That would be cool.
What level? Where are we starting?
Well, let's start at level 1.
All right.
We're new and we are scared of this world. I can't handle level 5. That is way too much. So for your Dragonborn, what class were you thinking, Ryan? And let's set this. Are you going from a role-playing perspective, combat, a mixture of both? What kind of player are you?
Braxton, that's a great question. My DM. Yeah, I was excited to come play some D&D. I'm not big into the whole mechanics stuff. I don't really understand it too much. I'm still new to the game. So I was thinking, just maybe making a fun little sorcerer, possibly, for, there's some spells. You said it was a little more complicated, but, I could see a Dragonborn just kind of having some, I think, I'm not positive, but I was reading the player's handbook. And the sorcerer, I believe, you're just kind of born with this innate magic. I could see a Dragonborn having that.
Yeah, that can be really interesting. And in my brain, what I imagine is coming up behind this figure in this robe, and I'm at a bar, and this guy's really cool looking. I want to learn about magic, and he seems like he knows magic. I come up to him and tap him on the shoulder. His arm is really rock solid and tough. And he turns around, and from this hood is this scaly muzzle, this I don't know, beak-like thing. Oh. And he seems to be a lizard. And just that image, somebody turning around and being a sorcerer Dragonborn could be really cool. And also you can spew magical fire from your face anyways. So
that's fun.
Or acid or lightning. It's kind of badass. But Ryan, as we kind of go along and try to pick your character's abilities, I'll suggest that you take a look at what kind of things your character is good at and what abilities he's inclined towards, and think about how that kind of makes your character's personality and go based off of that. Nothing is stuck in stone. You don't have to stick with a lot of this. It can change as you grow. So don't feel too, pinned down to what you've chosen. And of course, I've done this with my DM. I've changed my character a couple of times mid-campaign, like level 6. So nothing is written in stone. This character sheet isn't absolute. But to start, if you're going to go with, you said a sorcerer?
I'm thinking it, yeah.
Thinking a sorcerer. So let's go to the page for a sorcerer in the player's handbook.
It's also, speaking of going to the classes, in case you're new, you're not entirely sure what to be doing, where to be putting your points, which we'll be getting to in a moment. There is a section for each class where it says quick build, and just easily helps you decide what should be highest, what spells you should possibly be thinking about taking. It's a very handy tool.
Yeah, he's used it a lot more than I have, even though he says he doesn't know much about making a character. I'm currently scrolling down to classes right now. It's taking me.
I was looking.
There's Tieflings, wonderful.
Mr. DM, I was looking at my Dragonborn traits here. And it says that for Dragonborns, their ability score for Charisma increases by 1. And I was looking at Sorcerer, and they use Charisma as their stat line for spells. So seems like it'll be a good choice.
It may very well be a good choice. And we'll talk about how to raise those ability scores in just a moment, because that's the next part we'll get to as I reorganize here. So for the Sorcerer, as we're looking, yes, Charisma is their proficiencies are Constitution and Charisma. which
Sure.
Constitution. And you know what? Let's explain what these ability scores are, because that's one of the portions of the character sheet I think is the most important. We don't have to go into very, very large, in-depth concept of every bit and piece of it. But for ability score, strength, obviously that's your ability to punch and lift things and
Boom.
overpower people.
Big boy.
Dexterity is deftness, that flick of the dagger, being able to
Or
sneak a spell, cast it out.
Yeah, dive underneath something, do some acrobatics.
Absolutely. And there's a little portion to the right, and you can see, with acrobatics, that's a dexterity focused thing. If you have a higher dexterity score, that will also be higher. Constitution, that's your health. Every time you level up, the higher your constitution is, the more health you'll build over time.
Or how much you can drink. Hold your liquor.
Breathe underwater.
Breathe underwater.
I think some Dragonborns can breathe underwater.
Oh, perfect.
Which would be very interesting. Intelligence, I believe that's for wizards most of the time. That comes with things like religion. I believe history might be a part of it as well, right?
For intelligence?
Yeah. It is.
Yes, yeah.
It's studious things that require a lot of thinking. Wisdom, I almost describe wisdom as a sixth sense.
Kind of.
If that makes sense. It's your ability to perceive the world and make, not make things, but if there's an eldritch horror in front of you, if you're extremely wise, you might be able to handle staring it down.
Yes, that's true.
And if you can't tell, I like wisdom a lot.
A lot of people think that intelligence and wisdom are kind of the same idea, but I think it's important to think that you can be super smart, super intelligent, but just not really wise, not able to understand your surroundings, or not
it's
able
like
to
book smarts versus street smarts.
Exactly.
And think about it this way: you could say strength and dexterity are the same thing. They both involve moving an extremity of your body in a certain direction with a, physical inclination. Those are the same thing. So think of those kind of two each and pairs of their own.
Charisma, sitting at the bottom.
Ooh, that's a fun boy. It's interesting because there's not a lot of interaction with charisma other than when you're trying to persuade somebody, intimidate them, do a performance.
Which is why I think they chose sorcerer to have charisma stat line.
Yeah.
In some ways, it doesn't really make sense, but I think they're giving charisma. So I guess because it's coming innately, you're not smart about it. Though I could also see argued wisdom could be a good one for it as well. But
yeah, I never thought about that. It is very. I get warlock because they're crazy boys, but interesting. Okay, so for your dragonborn sorcerer,
yes,
if you're wanting to be a bit efficient with how it's going, let's think about what stats he's going to want primarily. Which ones he's going to want to be the highest. So you said
some high charisma.
Absolutely. And what we'll do, I guess, right now, Ryan, do you even have a D6 in front of you?
I don't.
Okay. I think I might.
I wasn't listening to the preface.
Oh, man. Well, I do have a D6, and we don't have to go through this whole thing. But there are a few... Though. Oh, that works perfectly. There are a few ways you can decide what your stat block is going to be. So, one of the more RNG-based kinds is to roll 4d6, remove the lowest one, and add up 3. So you roll 4d6, you get a 5, a 6, a 6, and a 2. You get rid of the 2, and you add the 5 and the 2 6s together to get what one of your stat blocks would be. Depending on how strict your DM wants to play this, he could say, okay, this roll that you're doing right now is for strength. Or you can roll 6 instances of this and plug and play those numbers as you want.
The downside of using something like that is you could get some terrible stats.
Absolutely.
And then your buddy over there just has everything super maxed out, super cool. But I think the pros of using something like this is it can help lead you down a route to roleplay a character in different formats. So let's say you weren't thinking about how you're going to play your character, but then intelligence is super low for some reason. Okay, sure. Now I'm playing a character that's not too smart. Let's do that.
Yeah, and it can suck sometimes. But do know that as you level up, and the speed of leveling is at the discretion of your DM and what you guys have discussed, but there are ways to improve your ability scores with certain levels. There's going to be a specific Dragonborn and a specific, well, not Dragonborn. There's going to be a specific sorcerer leveling table, and say, off the top of my head, I don't know what that is, but at level 5, they get an ability score improvement where you can add a
So
plus.
every person's at level 4.
Okay, level 4, so it's everybody then. I believe it's you can add 2 to 1 ability score or 1 to 2 ability scores. So let's explain.
Or if you want to make it even more confusing, you could get a feat.
Oh, those are more fun. Sometimes feat even add ability scores as well.
Yes.
And I did have a page here that let me know. Oh, I don't remember what it is, but Ryan, you may know this as well.
Sure.
Ability scores give you certain bonuses to your stats that they're related to. So, say for acrobatics, if you have a 0 in dexterity, your acrobatics rolls will be +0. And a situation where you would roll for that is, say, your Dragonborn is running up to this crevasse or crack in the ground, and he wants to jump over it. Your team goes, hey, my Dragonborn player friend, who has a name that we have not decided on yet, make a roll of a d20 and add your dexterity modifier to it to see if you are able to leap over this hole.
But I don't know my modifier. How do I learn that?
So, in that dexterity block, once you've decided what your stat is, say you've rolled a 10. You rolled a 10 for that dexterity block.
Sure.
10 is +0.
Yeah.
So you'd scoot your eyes over that dexterity block. You'd see that you have a +0. You'd roll your d20 to it, and you'd add 0.
Okay. I can do that.
Trying to explain that well. Yes. So, let's say your friend Johnny over there is playing a rogue, and he's got a 12 in dexterity. Kind of low for a rogue,
Johnny.
but for simplicity's sake. He tries to jump over the same hole, rolls his d20, but he's got a 12, which is a +1 to dexterity, which means every time he rolls for dexterity saves or checks, he gets to add 1. And every even number up to 20, so 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, goes up in a in an ability score bonus. So 12 is 1, 14 is 2, 16 is 3, 18 is 4, and 20 is 5. So that's how your character's in-game stats get better when you're talking to a character, when you're trying to win against somebody in an arm wrestling match. That's what these are affecting a lot of time.
But on this character sheet here, there's a little circle thing, and I don't really know what that means. You said proficiency? What the heck's a proficiency bonus?
Proficiency bonus, I think everybody has +2 from the start, correct?
I don't believe so. I believe it's
+1?
I can double check though.
It's one of those two. But
you're right, it is +2, yeah.
Okay. So that proficiency bonus, that gets added to anything your character is proficient in. What that means is a Dragonborn, I don't think has any proficiencies, but the race may get certain, I guess, role-playing preferences. We'll look this up. And if you
the
were
classes get more proficiency.
The classes get more.
Yeah.
So say for a sorcerer, I think they could be proficient in a certain amount of things like intelligence or history. And in that block to the right of your abilities, you'll see little bubbles and you'll see, medicine or whatever. But if you take a look at history and your sorcerer is able to be proficient in history, you'll fill in that bubble. And anytime you do something with history, you add your proficiency bonus. So that's +2. So say you have an intelligence of 20. You're the smartest wizard there ever has been. And you've got a +5 to all of your intelligence-based rolls. You also get to add a +2 because you're proficient in, say, history, or you're proficient in investigation.
Level 1, I have 20 intelligence.
Hey, one of my characters had 20 charisma. It depends. Ryan, if you optimize, and, I don't think that's your interest right now. Role-playing is also one of my interests. But if you are somebody like Johnny who likes to optimize, you may try to pick a character that has, or a race that has +2 to dexterity and a class that also has a + to dexterity to try to get the highest possible score off of just level 1.
It's a smart move, Johnny.
It is a smart move. But that's for somebody that really enjoys knowing they've made a character that is completely optimized and efficient and just kind of destroys combat. But there's also some stat-based stuff for those of you that really enjoy role-playing. And what you'll want to look at is that block next to the stat blocks on the left where it says acrobatics, animal handling, arcana. Those are what you're going to be using outside of combat for the most part, interacting with the world stats, as I like to kind of think about it.
So with a sorcerer, I get to choose 2 proficient skills from Arcana, Deception, Insight, Intimidation, Persuasion, and Religion.
So you'd pick 2 of any of those to be able to add +2 to. And as you level up, your proficiency bonus does go up. The character I'm looking at is a +3 in the proficiency bonus. So you're constantly learning how to be better in those areas. And that's how you'll think about this. You'll translate these numbers into your character's growth. So that's always a fun thing to think about, is as you are going to level 5, your character's learned more history, or they've become better at handling animals, or they know how to persuade somebody because they become more charismatic. And that's a fun thing about role-playing a character, and that's how you can get more excited about stats, is kind of reading them from a role-play perspective. And for those people that are more inclined to make an efficient character, they can look at these and say, well, I'm kind of liking that my character is really great at intimidation. I may play him more aggressively. There's something for everybody in a character sheet, and there's a great way to interpret. There's a great many ways to interpret what's on here. And to avoid going in depth on everything, part that I want to talk about now is character level. Ryan, how much do you know about how many ways there are to level up?
How many different ways there are to level up?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great question. You can either go with some XP, where your DM will give you some old XP for each little encounter that you have. Or if the DM decides XP can be a little too much to be dealing with for every single person and different encounters, then they'll usually go for a milestone, which means they'll just give you a heads up, say, hey, you did this last session, boom, level 2, let's go.
Level 2. So there are pros and cons to both. Ryan mentioned that for experience points, it is extremely tedious to get XP for every single fight. Say you come across a group of 7 goblins and the DM has to calculate how much EXP each of those are, or just look up in the monster manual and see what they're listed as. But say 2 of them run away and you kill 3 of them and take 1 hostage. DM's got to do some quick math and realize that you've killed 3. Each player gets XP for all of that. You could keep it discreet so that your players are having fun, or you could let your players keep track of it. But the problem with that is there's a lot of, I don't know, it can be a lot to keep track of, and when I play a game that has experience points, I'm always stressing over whether my character is accurately leveled, and that's putting a lot of the flow of the power creep in the hands of the players, which is fine if you're wanting to make it an extremely open world.
Though I would also argue if your DM's doing a good job, then you'll also get XP for that goblin that got away, or if you decided to, instead of fighting everybody, you just talk to everybody and stop the fight from happening, then you get XP for that encounter as well.
Right. But as a group, you could decide to go out and kill some goblins to gain some experience points. And your DM would be like, oh, okay, yeah, let's go kill some goblins. And you surprised them, and maybe you gain a level when they weren't expecting it. And that can be a bit tough on newer DMs. For milestones, there are story points, I guess, placed throughout the world, or mentally the DM has bookmarked. As you kill that vampire, or you slay the werewolf, or you get the princess back, you've gained a milestone and you've leveled up. I think there are a couple ways to go about this, Ryan. I don't know what you've done, but do you place them throughout the world, or is it more of a straight line of they do this and then this and then this?
I mean, we've talked this before, I have different storylines and different things happening at all different times in the world that the players are playing in. And as they hit and do different big things that they're kind of heading off, they hear, like we were talking about before, they hear down the line that there's this strange stuff happening at this mine, and then they eventually get to the mine, for what's going on, have some encounters, have some fights, learn what's been happening, and survive the encounter. Then hey, that's a level up. You did a good job.
Yeah, we just got one recently that I've been pining for a bit. And with leveling up, whether you're doing experience points or you're doing milestones, a sorcerer level 1 has a proficiency bonus of 2. They get the feature ability to spellcast, and they have their Sorceress Origin, which we could read about a bit, which is pretty cool. Let me open that up. Sorceress Origin, as according to D&D Beyond. Where'd you go? There it is. You get to choose a Sorceress Origin, which describes the source of your innate magical power. A draconic bloodline detailed at the end of the class description, or
Did you say
from a different
draconic
source.
bloodline? And I'm going with the Dragonborn?
Yeah, this is in D&D Beyond, which
It's almost
is
like it was perfect.
official. It is absolutely perfect. So you get to pick what your Sorceress Origin is, and I would implore you to go through the player's handbook and kind of read up on that and what you can do.
It's also important to remember to check other resources as well, like Xanathar's guide just recently came out, and that it has
love
more origins for the sorcerer and different kind of subclasses as well.
Yeah, really understand what resources you can look at so that you don't end up like me and wanting to, switch your character at the drop of a hat because you found something cooler. Campaign hopefully is something you'll be in for a long time, but for Sorceress, if you go on dndbeyond.com/classes/sorcerer and you find the sorcerer table, you'll notice at first level, I've mentioned you get +2 and you get that spellcasting and Sorcerer's Origin. You get to know 4 cantrips, and that's getting into spells. That's a scary thing. Spells are scary, but when you understand them, they're fun as hell. Cantrips are spells that you can cast anytime. Yeah, some
Anywhere.
of them may be in action anywhere. They don't cost. Well, some of them may cost resources, but they don't take up spell slots. And spell slots are basically ammunition. So you get to know 4 cantrips, which is a good amount. Something you can do is just Google D&D 5e cantrips, and that's a good place to start. You know 2 spells at level 1, and those spells are all of the first level, and you have 2 spell slots for level 1. So I've just dropped a lot of information on you. Ryan, what questions do you have?
Well, I'm over here looking into the spell section of the player's handbook, and my God, there's a lot.
Oh, yes.
But something that caught my eye, and I guess would be important to make sure whenever I decide to choose my spells, I see that there's, at the beginning, there's something that says Bard spells, and there's a whole bunch. There's Cleric spells, there's a whole bunch. Then Druid spells, I don't even see. There's Sorcerer spells. So are there specific spells for specific classes?
Absolutely. Only certain classes can learn certain spells. There are ways to learn spells from other classes. Say if you're a warlock and you are of the Tome Pact, they can learn 3 cantrips from any class. Usually, spells are tied to a class. So your sorcerer will learn sorcerer spells. So you, at level 1, know 4 sorcerer cantrips and 2 first-level sorcerer spells. And you can mull it over and look and see which ones are fun for your character to know. They fit roleplay-wise, or they're the most powerful. It just depends on how you want to play the game.
There's also a lot of overlap. For example, like Counterspell can be picked up by the Sorcerer, the Warlock, the Wizard, the Fighter, specific subclass for the Eldritch Knight, or the Rogue, the Arcane Trickster, or the Redemption Paladin. So just keep in mind that there's not just one, like, if you're just now learning and picking up spells, that just because it says Counterspell on one sheet doesn't mean you can't pick it up for yours as well.
Absolutely. And as you level up, you'll notice that level 2, as a sorcerer, you get Font of Magic, which means at second level, you tap into a deep wellspring of magic within yourself. This wellspring is represented by sorcery points, which allow you to create a variety of magical effects. We have a player who uses them all the time, and sorcery points are described as you having 2 sorcery points and you gain more. Okay, so you start with 2 sorcery points and you gain more as you reach higher levels, blah, blah, blah. We can get into that if we have a whole episode.
Yeah, I think at some point we'll probably have specific episodes for specific classes where we can dive much deeper into the roleplay aspects and the way that these classes work. But for the time being, if you're confused about sorcery points, search them up on Google, ask your friends, ask your people, and make sure you read in the player's handbook.
Absolutely. So moving away from leveling and summing it up, you get more cool things as you grow, and you kill stuff, and you do big events in your world that your DM has crafted for you. The next thing to look about, and this is getting more into roleplay, is your background. And the Player's Handbook has a whole section on this. This can help you start making your character's backstory if you have no idea where you're going with. Ryan,
yes.
Big question for you. Do you know what page backgrounds are on?
I do. Page
What is it?
127.
127. Let me get there. That's my way of
And there's even more. There's more backgrounds in Xanathar's, I believe. I'm not
Yes, there are.
positive. Okay.
So the player's handbook has a bunch of them. If you look them
Yes.
up online, usually you will only see the Acolyte, as that is their one allotted free
It's the free one. Yeah.
one. So I would recommend getting your player's handbook. And Ryan, what were you thinking for your Dragonborn sorcerer?
It's a great question. Well,
There's a
acolytes,
lot.
acolyte sounds like a good one, but that's it might be a little too good boy of this dragon. Maybe he's got some criminal background, or
Interesting.
maybe he's it's a lot of different choices. Maybe he's a hermit. Maybe he's just been
Hermit.
hanging out. He lost his clan down the line, so now he's by himself. Or if we're depending on where we started or what the backstory I decided to choose for my guy. But hey, who's to say this guy's not a noble? Maybe he's a good up and coming noble in the world and is in line to be the next lord of the kingdom.
The Mad Mage of Kavoth is going to destroy everything, and he's deeply involved in his backstory.
But not until unnamed Dragonborn comes out of nowhere.
Exactly. So
Yeah, let's
let's
go
say we
noble.
went with
Noble sounds
noble. Okay. Let's scroll down to that boy. Where are we at?
And I think to me the most important aspect of Xanathar's as a guy that makes mainly NPCs, there's a section on page 61 of Xanathar's guide that is just called "This Is Your Life," and holy moly, there's a lot of tables, a lot of things to look at there. It even has, if we scroll and look for background, there's a whole table. Let's say we're going with the noble background. There's a D6 table here that says why did I become a noble? Maybe and my family has been disgraced, and I intend to clear our name.
There's a ton of. Oh, we have a cat. He's a sweet boy.
He's over here
But
now.
both in the player's handbook and Xanathar, that's why I mentioned you may need a D6 or even D8. Some of them. There are these portions of the character sheets that say personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. Those are not things that have to restrict you. You don't have to go by them all the time, but they're a great place to start if you don't know what to do. So
You
for
don't even have to
noble-
roll on these tables. Just
No,
read
you can
them,
just pick.
grab one you like.
So for the ideals for a noble, just out of the 6 of them, there's respect, responsibility, independence, power, family, and noble obligation. You could pick those and decide what they mean, or you could pick one specifically, say your noble, his ideal is responsibility. It's his duty to respect the authority of those above me, just as those below me must respect mine.
I got a great question for you,
Great
DM.
question.
In these ideals, there's a little thing in in parentheses afterwards. It says good, lawful, chaotic, evil, any. Well, what does that mean?
So this is the ever titular alignment of Dungeons and
alignment.
Dragons. What that means is this is how your character usually acts, how they interact with the world, what their personality is at a very base line. Some people don't like this because they think it restricts certain characters. Some people do like it because they think it guides the performance and personality of their dragonborn sorcerer. So, Ryan, what kind of person do you think he is? Is he evil? Is he somebody who abides by the law?
I don't know. I feel like being a noble here. Maybe I got to be a noble by doing some. I did some back things and some back deals with some thief guilds or something, and I've been kind of backstabbing some of the other politicians to get up and coming in the world. So probably not lawful as well. I don't think I'm a lawful boy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I necessarily say I'm evil though.
Okay.
Just,
So you'd say neutral, or
Maybe it's tough. Alignment seems a little confusing.
so let's pull up a handy dandy chart because this can always
Yes,
help.
I was
And
just
there's a
saying there are
great-
some places where you can look up if you look up alignment chart D&D and even type in some of your favorite pop culture movies or shows. They can help you narrow down exactly what it means. Like here it shows neutral good is Harry Potter.
Hey,
Lawful
you know
good
what?
is Hermione.
People love The Office, don't they?
They do. I love The Office. Great show.
I don't know these people's names. Do you know these people's names? Let me send you a link. You can read this.
I
This is
got it.
fun.
I think I found one here.
Yeah, there you go. I'm looking at a bunch of pictures of people's names who I know maybe 2 of them. But go ahead and explain this 3x3 grid.
Yeah, so they show They show here that Pam from The Office is lawful good. She's over there smiling.
Pam, I think they put her as lawful good. Mine says otherwise.
Really
Yeah, mine says neutral good for Pam.
interesting. We've got different sheets here. See, there's a lot. See, that's I guess that brings up a good point that alignment is very wishy washy.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't entirely sure. For me, my personal take on alignment is I'm not huge on it. I think it can be a good place to start. I'm not super strict about let's say Johnny over here put down lawful good on his alignment sheet, but here he is over, slaughtering innocents for whatever reason. Then of course I would have if it makes sense for his player to be doing that, I'm not gonna, get mad at him. But if there are some DMs who will then take their character sheet, cross out where it says lawful good, and we'll change it to, they're slaughtering innocents. That sounds pretty evil to me, or at least on a downtick. So it can vary from DM to DM. I'm not huge on alignment. I'd much rather, would rather you choose how your player would act instead.
Yeah, and at a baseline, if you do go with it, lawful is what it sounds like, somebody who abides by the law. And that's sort of the left side of the spectrum. On the right, you've got chaotic, which means you're random and you don't necessarily have a reason for your motivations, and you go on a whim and you do this good deed just because somebody's hurt here, and then you hear somebody else is in trouble and you go over there. That would be chaotic good. Chaotic evil would be somebody who just does dastardly deeds for the heck of it. If you go on the other end, lawful evil is like a devil that has a very meticulous reason for why he is doing this dastardly deed. Neutral, true neutral, is somebody who does whatever the heck. A lot of people pick chaotic neutral because it allows them to do whatever they want, whenever they want. And people who pick chaotic neutral, they might identify it as a lot, but I would say those are the people that don't enjoy alignment. Secretly. They just don't know it yet. They just want to be everything all the time. So alignment's really fun to kind of start, like Ryan said. But next, we've kind of covered everything that's in the top right box, being class, race, your background, alignment, player name. What's your name, Ryan?
That's a great question.
No, player name. Ryan, what's your name?
That's a great question.
You
Well, let's see. Let's go to I don't really know what Dragonborns talk with, so let's hop into where in the player's handbook we mentioned earlier. Let's see. Do I want to go with a female Dragonborn or a male? That's important to know too. And I think it's a lot of people think that just because I'm a man, I have to play a male. But that's whatever you feel comfortable doing. If you want to play a lady, go play a lady. I'm gonna go with Akra.
Akra.
Yeah, a female Dragonborn. Akra,
place that in there. Now we've got a name for Akra. So, to kind of go through the next portion, if you've read your ideals and bonds and flaws and personality traits and you've picked ones that you really enjoy, let's get into the, not necessarily nitty-gritty, I don't want to get too overly complicated, but armor class. If you see that as kind of below the character name and to the right of the abilities, that means it's the characteristic of your armor, how easy you are to hit, how easy it is to pierce that ironclad or that steel plate that you're wearing.
How small and nimble you are to hide from some hits.
There's a lot of ways to interpret it, so don't think of it as simply a shield you're holding up and how strong it is. It's your ability to avoid damage, essentially. For a Dragonborn, Ryan, do you know how to figure that out? Your sorcerer class.
No, I'm a new player. I know it has something to do with my dexterity, but other than that, I don't know how my armor, if I have any armor.
I don't think sorcerers can wear anything other than maybe light armor.
Oh no. Does that mean I'm gonna die? Should I switch classes?
Absolutely not. There's this is getting into more mechanics, but you could be a glass cannon where you try to hide and you rely on a tank in your party to, tank all the damage. Even if you are a sorcerer and you have only 10, which I believe is the base AC.
What about my dex?
Oh, your dexterity? What is your dexterity? Have we decided?
Let's say it's a 14.
It's a 14. You have a +2 to dexterity, which means you get to add 2 to your AC, your armor class, which would put it at 12.
Okay, that's not terrible.
So, Mr. Ryan, let's say I've got a goblin coming at Miss Akra.
Thank you.
Let's say we have a goblin coming at you, and he is going to roll to attack, and I roll.
He better not.
Oh, he didn't do so good. He's coming at you with his club, and he rolls an 11.
Ha!
That doesn't hit you.
Take that, goblin of
So-
Kabav.
Oh no, this goblin for some reason had a magical ability to re-roll if he doesn't hit somebody. Overpowered goblin. He rolls again and lands a 13.
Oh no.
That hits you.
What if he?
Takes some
What if he
damage.
hits my? What if he just hits a 12? Will that still hit me?
What do you hope?
I hope it doesn't.
Well, it does, unfortunately. Numbers that meet your armor class do indeed connect, and they will deal damage to you. So, now that we've covered that and kind of how it's calculated, let's go to initiative, which is also tied to your dexterity. So, if you have a 14 in dexterity, which is
I
a
do.
+2, your initiative is also +2. And do you know what initiative is?
I don't know. It sounds like something. Whenever initiative, I'm starting something, right? I'm taking the initiative.
So, what this means is if at some point a DM says roll initiative, it usually was preceded by somebody getting attacked or somebody being aggroed or kind of turning hostile towards you. In other words, your initiative gets added to a d20 roll that you do at the beginning of combat, and that determines the order in which you get your turn.
I see.
So if you roll a 14 and you add 2, your
Alright.
initiative is 16,
Aha.
which means anybody that has an 18 or a 17 or anything above 16 goes before you. Anybody that has below a 16 goes after you. Now, the thing
Interesting.
that happens if it's on par, there's a couple of choices you can do. You go with whoever has the faster or higher dexterity, or you just kind of flip a coin.
Or you can decide if it's 2 players. I usually will let them decide between the 2 of them. Say, do you want to go first this round, or do you want me to go first this round?
There's plenty of ways to go about it.
Plenty.
To the right of initiative is your speed, which is usually tied to your race. There are ways to increase it with feats or parts of your class, but for a Dragonborn, I believe it's 30 feet. Correct?
That is.
So, 1 round in D&D is 6 seconds.
Oh.
During that 6 seconds, you can move your full movement. So a speed essentially means how fast a character can move in 6 seconds.
Okay.
So 30 feet for a Dragonborn. Be that in the more fluid role-playing world, if you go 30 feet at your normal pace, you're probably going to take 6 seconds. There are ways to double that, but we'll talk about that in just a second. In combat, you are able to do movement once every turn, in addition to your base action.
But that's
and your
a,
bonus
that's a
action.
whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast. I'm just peeking into it right now. But every turn you can move your full movement. So that's how you should look at your speed. Below that is your hit point maximum, and that is tied to Constitution. This one gets complicated sometimes, and I'll need to pull up a resource that I should have had already. But Ryan,
Yes.
do you know how to explain it?
For hit points, are you asking?
Yes.
Yeah. So for hit points, you're gonna want to. Usually, this is how I, as a DM, this is how I let players do it for like the first 1 or 2 levels, just so they're not, 3 hit points or 5 hit points away from dying. I usually just give them the full max. So it's just, I don't want a player feeling like they're gonna die just so they trip over something, So I usually give them the full max, which basically would mean, let's say for the sorcerer, you need to find in the class features section, it will say hit dice. That actually more specifically even says hit points at first level will be 6 plus your con modifier. And since we said con modifiers be kind of high for a sorcerer, or should be, let's say we got a +3 to that. So it'd be 6 plus 3, so boom. I got 9 HP at first level.
Squishy boy.
And for every level after that, then you're going to want to roll your hit die, which for a sorcerer is a 1d6, and then add your con modifier. So again, say you roll a d6, you get a 3, plus the 3 that we had from the con modifier, that's 6. You add that to your 9, and there you go. You're laughing.
Bam. And that's what your hit points are. As you take damage, below that hit point maximum, you'll write what your current hit points are. So you took 6 damage, you go from that 9 to a 3. You have a 3 in your current hit points. Temporary hit points, what that is, there are certain spells, say Armor of Agathis, which adds, I believe it's 5 or 10, something around there. I should really know because I use it all the
That's
time.
all right.
Temporary hit points. So temporary means once they're gone, they're gone. You cannot recover there. Maximum means you can always recover health up to that point. So hit dice are also used to recover health during short rests. They're essentially potions that you always have, if you think about it, that you can only use whenever you are relaxed and concentrated and in a safe place for about an hour. We could go super in depth on all of the character sheet, but I think at this point we've covered most of what's going on.
Yeah, the only other thing, depending on how much role play you want to get into, is there's a section on the second page of most character sheets where it has your age, eyes, eye color, height, skin color, weight, hair, and a lot of that stuff can be found in the section on your specific race. If you just read into the traits, it'll just kind of say like most Dragonborn, they grow pretty quickly. They walk after years or after hours of hatching. It's quite different than years. Then they attain their size and development at around 10-year-old human child by the age of 3. So, and they reach adulthood by 15. So, and they live to be around 80. So you just kind of keep in mind where you're headed along those lines. And it even says size and weight and stuff like that. So you can figure all that jazz out for yourself.
Absolutely. And use some of that to kind of guide how you're writing your backstory. And as we discussed before, the more backstory you write, or the more not dedicated, what's the word?
I don't know.
Connected you get to your character, usually the more fun you'll have. Something else to note is that your race and your class will be proficient in certain weapons, which means that they can use them effectively. They could learn tools that they're proficient in, like a herbalism kit, which means you could probably make some medicines.
The more attached you get,
the
more sad you'll get as well when your character inevitably dies. It gets ripped out of your clutches. The second you die, your DM stands up, takes the player sheet from you, tears it up, rips it up in front of your face, and the tears just begin to fall.
And then you have to make
it's good fun.
And you come back to this podcast so that you can kind of learn how to do it all over again.
Perfect.
One last thing is that races have certain language they speak, and classes have a certain amount of classes or languages that they can learn.
And we could spend hours and hours going through making characters, doing different things, because the opportunities are endless, really.
Truly are. Like, I've got a tiefling warlock, probably the most stereotypical thing, that is just a completely different person from this Akra that we've made. So experiment with stuff, make several characters, and honestly, I spend hours upon hours upon hours in character creation in video games. Hell, Dragon Age Origins.
Oh yeah,
that character creator is so weird, and this is just physical appearance. It's a bit different, but I spent 8 hours in that game. Did not even play it. It was just the character creation, me being frustrated with it. So
Black Desert Online, great character creator.
Good.
Pretty sure you can download that for free still.
Yeah,
so
it's coming out on consoles, I think. That was just cool. So maybe you console owners, enjoy that.
And again, I highly recommend, to help you make your backstory and character, hop into Xanathar's, go to the This Is Your Life section, and just go to town. I mean, it's pages upon pages upon pages upon pages of different tables and things you can roll and find why you're that class, or weird stuff, or what your family's like, different supernatural events, some tragedies, so many different things.
Hell, there are even online resources for randomly generated backstory that you can use for inspiration. Give that old Google station a checkout and say background generator, Dungeons & Dragons 5e.
You can hop into Bing if you're feeling crazy.
Oh god.
Or ask Jeeves if you're feeling really old school. Yeah, Jeeves has it all.
Or Yahoo.
No one uses Yahoo.
Oh, people use Yahoo, let me tell you. But at the end here, Ryan, are you ready?
Well, the last thing I could think about.
Oh, is there more?
There's always more when it comes to the wonderful world of D&D. But, more specifically, some of the other resources, I'm not going to go through these at all. But just some I want to shout out, ones that I've used, sent to my players, or sent to even use in my own NPC creations and resources that I use. Is one of them is the Midgard World Book from a Kobold Press, I believe. I should know this.
Press?
I believe
Sounds
so.
Familiar.
Yeah, Kobold Press make a lot of great stuff that I use. But they have the Midgard World Book, and at the end there's the 5th edition appendix. They even have stuff for Pathfinder if you want to get into Pathfinder as well. They have backgrounds, different spells, different domains for clerics and paladins and all that fun jazz. And I also have used Faiths of the Forgotten Realms. Granted, in my world, the deities are loosely based on some of the Forgotten Realms deities as well as some other ones, but they still have some basic ideas similar, and I've sent them off to. We have a cleric in our current party, and I've sent some of their ideas off to him, and he has utilized them. Volo's guide, like we mentioned earlier, has lots of different fun things to look at. Again, with the Midgard stuff, Midgard Heroes it is Kobold Press, so I was correct. They have the ones where I got the Centaur from. They have lots of different races in there, some background if you want to just hop in there. The Xanathards, like we mentioned, and even still, there's another one like a Cthulhu book that I've utilized. Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes also has some different character stuff. So just, go crazy, look at things, but be sure to check with your DM, make sure they're all right with it. I would hope they're okay with most of these things. If they aren't, for whatever reason, discuss with them. Say, hey, looking at this doesn't seem overpowered to me. This doesn't seem crazy. The way I look at things is if you can make it make sense for your character and it's not overshadowing all the other players, sure, let's go for it. Let's have some fun. That's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Right. And something as we close off here, and our good friends in our campaign asked me is, how much focus should you place on the group dynamic? Say your party has like 4 paladins, but you also really want to play a paladin. I would recommend that you don't care too much about it unless your group has decided to be super, super combat oriented and you want to coordinate.
Yeah, if you're doing a dungeon crawl campaign, like our session 0, usually a lot of times character creation will happen at session 0 after the DM is described. This is what we're playing. Then so that way you at least know what character you should be making for this type of campaign.
Yeah. So don't worry too much about your group dynamic, how much you should talk or what you need to do. Make your backstory and let that decide what your character does.
And build some relationships with the other players if you want to really get attached to your party.
That's a big thing. Definitely try to write other characters in your backstory. So I think all in all from this, it's not too tough to make a character, but the big focus you should put is on your backstory. And once everybody's got theirs written, see if there's any places you can't insert each other in there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are you ready?
I like it. What am I ready for?
Let's do the roll.
Do the roll. Do you want to roll first, my friend?
Let's, I guess I've kind of gone first every time. Let's do it.
Boom.
Oh,
I don't know if you have the link, but there it is.
Linky boy. Click and do. All right.
Roll that D100.
Let's avoid these 30s again.
And if you guys are unaware what we're doing, this is your first time hopping in, there's this sheet that's the lovely V_Crimson made on D&D Behind the Screen Reddit page. There's a roll sheet. This has 2 sides of 100 table of options for just making interesting little objects and entities. And eventually we'll probably utilize this enough that we can find some other tables. I got hundreds of them, so it could be good fun.
Right. I've rolled my number. It's been sitting here staring me in the face.
All right.
It's a 19.
19. Okay, element.
Element.
Now roll your other D100.
Oh, that's so vague.
Element.
All right.
What kind of element is it?
13.
Interesting. So there's two table sizes. It's a subject and a descriptor. So you said 19?
Yes, and a 13.
So it is a radiant element. Boom, go.
Okay. So you come into this blacksmith's armory. You hear the clanging of anvil against
Excuse me, sir. Could you turn that down? It's a little loud.
No, I'm sorry. I can't turn this down. I'm working on my prized piece. It's very important. You wouldn't by chance happen to be that merchant I needed to come in, would you?
Unfortunately, no. I'm just passing through, an adventurer.
Then you hear a bell. Ding-a-ling-ling. In walks this robed sorcerer, you can only assume. You look under the hood, scaly face.
Oh no.
They have this jar, and the room seemed to get brighter as they walked in. You look at the jar, and you can see only a blinding light. They go to the blacksmith, and he turns and goes, nods towards the sorcerer. He places the jar on the anvil. The sorcerer backs away from the embers of the furnace, lighting the room. Even brighter is this jar of this element. The blacksmith places the sword on top, gets his hammer, slams it down. The jar breaks, shatters, pieces go everywhere. Light is blinding your eyes.
Oh!
And the next thing you know, the blacksmith is turned around towards you, holding an ever-radiant sword.
Oh my word. Akra, is that you?
I think it is Akra.
Oh.
But that's nothing.
Okay, I like it. I'm intrigued.
That was weird.
I wonder what that could possibly mean.
He's probably going to want you to buy it.
I don't want to. I don't have money.
All right. Yeah, probably
All right.
Very expensive.
So let me get my D100 rolled.
For all I know, you could be picking ones that you want to read.
Oh no, I just got 77.
Oh.
Energy plant? Oh my word.
Energy plant.
And 85. Okay, this
Give
is
it to
quite
me.
possibly the worst thing I could have ever rolled. Why would I ever introduce this in my game? This is an uninteresting energy plant. It already is. It's an energy plant. Okay.
No, come on, you can. There's so many ways to do this.
All right. After months of walking along the endless plains of Yukani, the party sees off in the distance a structure for the first time ever. On closer inspection, it appears to be some old, when there was a river that used to flow through here. It looks like this used to be a power plant of sorts that would utilize the river to power some of the nearby villages and whatnot. As the party gets closer and begins to inspect the remnants of this old energy plant, they begin to feel like they're being watched by something.
Somebody there.
They see eyes poking out of the darkness, dark white, or bright white. It can't be dark white. And it just seems oddly interesting as they get closer and closer and closer. There's a quick scutter of movement, and the eyes run away and return closer than before. One of the party members, the paladin, touches their staff and lights up the room with their light spell. They can see for the first time algae covering the floors, moths and whatnot flying around. The eyes are coming from some mice walking around the room. It appears to be that's all that's here.
That's rather uninteresting.
How uninteresting. And no food, which means the party will probably die.
Well, that's
out in the
interesting.
wilderness. Damn it.
You failed. So I took energy plant as like a plant that has energy.
Oh, that's cool.
That's what I
Actually,
thought
I
of.
guess it's not cool. It's uninteresting.
Yeah, it's an uninteresting energy plant. Oh man, wonderful.
Fantastic.
A radiant element sword and an energy plant that is uninteresting.
Uninteresting. Come on, the Crimson. Why would you put uninteresting on there?
To challenge you.
I don't want to bring in anything uninteresting into my game.
Sometimes you need it, man.
I want the players to be interested. You got to give them, whenever they go somewhere, you got to give them something to play with, or else what's the point, you know?
But if everything's interesting, isn't it all normal?
Maybe, I don't know.
Think about it. You gotta have uninteresting things to make the other things really interesting.
Boom.
Balance.
Damn.
All right, friends. This is the end here. Ryan, tell them our handles because I'll mess it up.
Well, if you want to hate on us, or you want to say something stupid, or you want to respond to something dumb that we said, you want to correct us, there's a couple ways you can go about doing that.
Probably a lot of those this episode.
You can email us at thedungeoncrawlpod@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at dungeoncrawlpod. And that's about it. If you want to review us 5 stars on iTunes, that will greatly help us out. It's a good way to stop the Mad Mage of Kavath from getting any stronger in his kingdom. The more ratings we have,
stronger,
the lower his power is. So keep that in mind.
All powerful right now. This is the beginning of our podcast campaign. We need to defeat him.
We need to. Together.
But the only way is...
With the power of friendship, we can do anything.
Well, sometimes. The power of friendship only get you so far. We need those stars.
Oh.
All right, friends. Have a great day. Have fun making those characters. And I have been Braxton.
I've been Ryan. And next time will be session 1.
I promise.
Hopefully.